We go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Bottom Line Podcast, where we say what we mean and we mean what we say, because at the core of everything that is, was, and forever will be, there will always be the bottom line. Today's guest is Mr. Brian Lewis over at Exalt Youth, right? Exalt Youth is he's assistant director over at Exalt Youth. Exalt Youth is one of those organizations that we need more of, if I want to be honest. So I was looking at the website, and I think the youth is the future. The youth are the future, right? And there's this gray area, this point where we can catch them and we can make them self-aware. We can increase resources that might not be available for them, create resources and then increase the resources, right? So that they can see what options are available. And that's the kind of work that Brian is doing over at Exalt Youth. So I wanted to have him on today. So so we can get a better understanding as entrepreneurs, as parents, as members of the community, so that we can know what we can do in our communities to empower our youth, because they are the future, right? So Brian, thanks for taking the time today to be a guest on the Bottom Line. How have you been, man? How's your week going?
I'm good, brother Dennis. I'm hanging in there. My week is going pretty well.
Good. Glad to hear it. Mine too. So I kind of want to start out with how you, how did you adjust with this pandemic, right? And still being able to reach the youth at the level that you've been doing.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has served us really well in this pandemic is that Exalt has always, thought about the world in view of its opportunities, in light of its opportunities. And so because we have this asset-based approach and we've always looked at the world that way, we approached this very challenging time of this global pandemic, of the racial injustices that have always been there, but have been particularly heightened, and the focus has been even more so right during this time. We approached all of these things with the opportunities that exist within them. Mm-hmm. And we tried to understand, how can we continue to deliver on our mission, which you highlighted, our mission, right? Our mission is to make sure that court-involved young people between the ages of 15 and 19 in New York City permanently move their trajectory away from system involvement. And so that's what we've been doing since 2006. We've been really leveling up our efforts even before the pandemic. And the pandemic, quite frankly, as hard and as challenging as it's been, has presented even more opportunities for us to get deeper in that work and deliver on that work.
In what way? That's amazing. In what way?
Well, I think it comes as no surprise that, one of my people I look up to, Cornel West, said, when America gets the cold, Black America gets the flu. And,
okay.
Most of the youth that Exalt serves are Black, brown young people, right?
Okay.
And that's by design. There's no coincidence in that, right? We know because of the school to prison pipeline, because of mass incarceration, because of the legacies of slavery and social control in cities like New York and all over this country. When you look at who is in the criminal justice system, you're looking at people who are predominantly brown and Black, people who are descendant of enslaved people, people who are immigrants or descendants of immigrants. And so these young people were hit real hard by both the pandemic. I mean, quite frankly, many of them experienced grief and trauma and loss by losing loved ones, by getting sick themselves during this pandemic, but also by the economic fallout associated with the pandemic. So we talk about things like layoffs and unemployment rates, people not having access to healthcare, being able to pay exorbitant medical bills. Our young people were hit some of the hardest. And so one of the things that we pivoted to do right away, which we had not done historically, is we made sure we were able to provide them with direct payments, $500 payments to their families, direct to their bank accounts. They did not have to earn that money. So we do have an internship component, and we've always had an internship program where our young people went to work, developed skills, got paid for work. But for the first time, we said, can we find funding and philanthropic support to infuse funds directly into accounts? And can we do that even if a young person does not have a bank account? What if they just have a cash app?
Yeah.
And we're able to do that and get that support. So we're really proud of that. We delivered tens of thousands of dollars directly to young people's families who are in need.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Here's something I want to draw a parallel here, right? In my world, the business world, and small business, whether it's marketing, there's an approach that it's more of a qualitative approach, I want to say. Okay. And the qualitative approach, I like, this is what made me reach out to you guys and say, I love what you guys are doing. And I think that we should partner because that approach is in the quality, it's in the relationship, it's in the saying what you just said, being able to send that money directly to their families, right? That's qualitative, right? That's that's B2C, business to consumer, right? Direct to consumer, right? It's cutting through all the red tape. You know what I mean? And saying, I know you guys are in need right now, and this is how we're going to support you. We'll find a way to support you based on the resources that we have available, right? And so I love the fact that you were able to do that. With the pandemic, I think a lot of us don't know how to pivot, and the fact that you guys were able to pivot in that way, that speaks volumes, right? To your level of commitment to the community and also to the youth, right? That you're servicing. Question I have for you now is, okay, so a lot of what you guys do with the youth is it's based in internship opportunities, right?
That's right.
Okay, so being able to transition from maybe going to a physical location and then now having to do internships virtually, how did you guys come up with that idea and how did you guys implement it?
Yeah, so I got to give credit to our teachers and our program coordinators. They recognized very quickly that there were a lot of opportunities, once again, to serve our young people. Now, I'll tell you, in the beginning, it wasn't through the computer.
Okay.
Because of the digital divide, we recognize that a lot of our young people don't have high-speed internet. They don't have laptops at home. So our first version of this was actually through phone lines. Because a lot of our young people just had maybe they have a track phone, they have a friend's phone or a relative's phone that they can use. And so we had conference lines set up, and the young people would dial in. And they would dial in, and we'd have class all through the phone.
Get out.
And young people were connecting at first through that, right? And then once we had them in those conference lines and we were able to connect with them through the phone, we were able to say to them, what would it take for us to get you a laptop, right?
Wow.
And then they would give us the address, and then we put in the addresses into our spreadsheets, and then we're able to identify philanthropic support to get them shipped to their houses with data plans, right? So we said we're not going to allow the digital divide or these failed systems, right? Because you all may have seen the New York Department of Education said they were going to provide devices to all of our kids. Well, all of our kids didn't get devices. So we're not going to wait, to your point about bureaucracy and red tape, we're not going to wait for these systems to deliver the things they say they're going to deliver. We're going to stand in that gap. We're going to send those things that our young people need directly to their houses so that there'll be no barriers to them being able to be on. And now our young people can get on Zoom, and they can get on the virtual classrooms that we have. We can design virtual workplace projects for them so they can continue to connect. And that's how we did that.
That's impressive. I got to ask, okay, so the first thing I want to know, right, is okay, how long did that process take? 1, 2, what was the response like when you're able to actually execute?
That process happened pretty quickly, I'll be honest. So again, one of the things that I'm proud of is that I believe the schools in New York City closed the second or third week in March. We closed our office by the end of the first week of March. So we identified, even back when people were saying, oh, this virus is a hoax, it's not real, it's not even gonna make it to here.
Right.
We said, no, this is real, right? Because we have global partners. We work with Google. And I was having a phone conversation with Google at the end of February, and they were like, oh, we're shut down completely. And I was like, y'all shut down completely, right?
So it's real.
This is coming, this is right. So we were able to look at where we are with my executive director and say, we need to shut down the office. And she has a lot of foresight. She has a lot of vision, right? She's a true leader. She's somebody that always is 10 steps ahead. Mm-hmm. She said, we need to shut this office down. We need to figure out a way to plan to get these kids laptops. Mm-hmm. We need to figure out a way to keep continuous operation going, because in many ways we're essential workers. So she was using language like that before people were even using essential worker language.
Yep.
And within a matter of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we were able to put together that plan, get those addresses and ship those laptops out the door with data plans, and then work on grant writing proposals to our philanthropic partners and say, look, we're already doing this. Will y'all support it, right? Because again, we're not going to wait for the dollars to come in. We need to get the services out immediately. It's essential. Yeah. So we did it very quick. Within 2 or 3 weeks, we got all those things up and running. And still, we're continuing to send out laptops, data plans, and connect with our young people through those ways.
That's amazing. Yeah, big shout out to Giselle, right, for thinking. I think foresight. Yeah, foresight is necessary, and the fact that you're working on a Google. So I was a little skeptical too in the beginning. I'm going to be honest, right? Like, ah, this is a scam, it's a hoax, whatever. But then when you start realizing like the shutdown and quarantine went into effect, and they were really being serious about it, it was like, oh, this is real, right? And it's like, how do we pivot? How do we adjust? I myself, with my coaching business, I'm able to to get across the country through Zoom, and I wasn't able to
Hmm.
do that before Zoom because a lot of people just they weren't like you said the digital divide. Here's the thing I want to bring, I kind of want to bring up too, right? That digital divide is not only common in low income areas.
That's right.
You
That's
know what
right.
I mean?
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people who are just don't like technology. They're like anti-tech. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And you got that whole iRobot mindset, kind of like, well, I'm not gonna. And I think right before the pandemic hit, we were coming into that, to automation, right? And we're talking about, I think that was the biggest fear. I work with a lot of call centers, and I work with a lot of guys who do cold calling, and I think Apple started to introduce software to their platform. That was going to be able to identify phone numbers that weren't recognizable. So
Hmm.
that way, it would be less cold calls from, what do you call those bots? You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So I think a lot of call centers were afraid of losing their jobs and being replaced by automation. I think this thing just accelerated the pandemic, accelerated that that process. So the fact that you're able to pivot as fast as you're able to do in such a minimal amount of time, 2 to 3 weeks, hats off to you. That foresight helped you guys, not only service your client base, but then show and prove your model. You know what
That's
I
right.
mean?
That's
And
right.
your efficacy at the same time. So it's like two birds with one stone. But now, okay, you're thinking like this. Giselle is thinking like this. What is staff like? What's going on with staff? Is it crazy? Are people like
It's a mix. Human beings are complex. you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah,
we're dealing with 18, 19 human beings. So some of them were also thinking 10 steps ahead, 15 steps ahead. Some of them were deers in headlights. Some of
yeah,
them were just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if we need to leave. I don't know if you're right. I don't know if this thing is real or not. And so it was a full gambit of reaction. I think the thing about leadership, right? And I'm sure you see this in your own role and in the work you do, is that you have to be kind of steady, right? You got to be like, right or wrong, right? You got to be like, this is what we need to do, and
right.
you got to show and model confidence. And so again, shout out to Giselle. She modeled confidence. She showed confidence. I did my best to do the same, as her number two. And I believe that the staff came around, right? And
Yeah,
they became as strong as we always knew that they were going to be, and even exceeded our expectations of
yeah,
what they could do and the ideas they could come up with for the different platforms and different ways that our curriculum could translate to the virtual realm. They continue to inspire me with the brilliance that they have, the creativity that they bring to translating this to an unknown world. This is
yeah.
all new to us. None of us
Well,
know,
figure. Yeah.
yeah. So, but they're doing a great job.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you're real. That's real right there, right? How did you even get started in this work, Brian? Like, you could have probably done anything. You decided to focus more on this kind of work, right? Where you can make an impact. How'd you get started in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of it as being in my DNA. So I'm a third generation educator. My grandmother was a public school teacher in Chicago. My father also taught public school in Chicago. I'm an educator as well. I grew up in Chicago, but living in New York City now. And when I was 17 years old, I never thought I was going to be an educator because I was not a good student. I was a
Right.
student that was, always in trouble or my grades were slipping. I
Yeah.
remember I was in this remedial summer program, and the
Really?
principal pulled me aside and was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You smart. Like, why are you being a goofy, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's get it together. Come on." Like,
Yeah.
and it was actually a nonprofit organization similar to Exalt that kind
Uh-huh.
of saved my life and turned me around. That introduced me to the arts and activism and education. And it made me realize that even though I might have been a struggling student, I could still be a transformative and powerful educator. In fact, there was a through line to that, right? The fact that I was a struggling student would make me an effective educator because I knew how to connect with those students. And those were always the students that teachers had the most difficulty bringing along.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of made that my mission very early on. And now, I'm 35 years old now. And, for the last, 15 years, 14 years, I've committed my life to doing this work, to trying to meet those students and empower those students who are left out, the ones who
Yeah.
are, who people have given up on.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you, man. I think, I mean, we need more and more. I started out a little bit, with advocacy too. I think education is a key part that we kind of, it's one of those words, education, where we think academically, we think about, you know, reading, writing, math, and all rote memorization and all that, but we don't think about the soft skills, right? That's not really what when you think about education, what the youth are actually attracted to, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. The soft skills, being able to connect, being able to build rapport. How'd you get to that level where you are now, able to build trust with your youth, your staff?
Yeah, you know, it's been a lot of hard lessons. You know, the youth have challenged me throughout my career.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I remember, you know, the first time, even before I got to Exalt, the first time I used to be a high school teacher. I used to
Really?
teach high school
Okay.
English. Yeah, I taught at a school on the west side of Chicago. And I remember I walked into the school for the first day. Now, mind you, I'm from Chicago. Like, my
Okay.
family goes back 3 generations in Chicago.
Okay.
I'm from the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
But my school was on the west side of Chicago.
So let's be clear. South side of Chicago's the hood.
Well, you know, it's complex. You know, like I feel like, you know, again, like you paint with broad brushes, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a part of the south side of Chicago that's the hood.
Okay.
You know, my family lived in different parts. My grandmother lived on 79th in Indiana, which is the hood. That's where like Chief Keef and you know,
Okay.
all of that stuff that these kids identify with. That's where all
Right.
that stuff went down, right?
Okay.
But other parts of my family lived in Hyde Park, which is where University of Chicago is.
All right.
Or Beverly or Morgan Park, which are upper class, middle upper class, you know,
Yeah.
homes and neighborhoods. And so I traversed all over the South Side, right?
So
Like,
you know it really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I know everything, right? But I felt like I connected with all those different parts of the community.
Yeah.
And I remember I came in to you know, school on the first day, and these kids testing me. They were like, yo, Mr. Lewis, where you from? And I told them the South Side, and they exactly what you just did. They're like, no, be clear though. What block you from?
Right. Right.
Like who you know, like, you know, this person,
Right. Right.
And it was a test that I had to pass, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, I can't just come in just claiming, you know, that I got your trust.
Right.
It's like, I have to build that with you, right?
Right.
Because over time, you know, you have to build relationships with young people. You have to answer their questions. You have to believe in them. You have to let them challenge you and show them that, you know, you're creating a safe environment for them.
Yep. Yep.
That's really where the soft skill, you know, people call that soft skills.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I don't even really like the term soft skills because
Okay.
it kind of denotes a weakness, right? Like there's really nothing soft about that. I think actually that is the hard thing to do. It's the
I love that
challenging
you
thing
said
to do.
that. I love that
You know
you
what I'm saying?
said that. Yeah.
Right. And our kids will
Yeah.
say that too. I'm like, this ain't easy stuff. This is actually the more difficult stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny, like a lot of our kids will come to us and say, I want to work in construction. I want to, you know, like those are the hard skills, right? I want to work in technology, whatever.
Right.
And they can do that, right? They can go get a certificate. They can be on a construction site and like whatever. But how do you learn how to build trust with people? How do you learn how to code switch? How do you
Right.
learn how to navigate environments that were not built for or designed for you?
Right.
That stuff is like,
That's what we're talking
where do you
about.
go, to your point, like you're saying, right? What school is going to teach you that?
Right.
What program is going to give you that certification?
Yeah.
And so the great thing about the work we do in Exalt is that we do kind of provide that certification, that stamp. You know, everything that we curated is built around trying to do that for our youth.
Yeah, I want to get more to like, because I had that similar experience too, right? I worked at a homeless shelter with the youth, and they were coming out. I don't know if you're familiar with the Covenant House, right?
Oh yeah, we work with Covenant House. They're
Yeah,
great.
Covenant House is no joke, okay? Because
Yeah.
they're coming from like 15, they're runaways, they're little drug
That's right,
dealers, they're
yeah.
little gangsters, right?
right.
They're doing all of it, you know what I mean? They're doing it hard, right? There's a lot of recidivism, and they're coming in and out. They got a 30-day time limit. If they could be there for 30 days, they don't get a job, they don't get employment, they don't get education, they're out, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
a revolving door, and I love them. I love them. Why? Because they are, I think it's about redirecting them. You know what I mean? The passion is there for them to go hard on being a gangster. The passion is there for them to go hard on, even a lot of them are good students, you know? A lot of them are hard workers, you know? And I think at that age, they're so impressionable that they just need encouragement. They need guidance.
I'm so glad you touched on that and that's what these kids need. They need love, you know, and
Yeah.
they know more than anybody what real love is.
Yeah.
In part because a lot of times they haven't gotten it, right? And so they see you walk into that room, they're like, this is somebody who's authentic, somebody I can connect with. I know that this person actually cares about me. They can sniff phony in a heartbeat in a second, right? And so you're right. I love these kids too, and that is really what makes for a great practitioner in this line of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm okay. So like at the same time, there's a level of trust, and this is kind of what I wanted to get to with like you being able to connect, because that level of trust is like you have to reestablish that level of trust on a daily basis, right? It's not like once you get it, you got it, because their lives change rapidly. Like one day could be better, one day could be worse, and then you're dealing with the consequences. You're dealing with the effects of whatever their day was like, right? So it's like building trust is a challenge. For you, I'm wondering when you realized you were going to be effective in and impactful in these kids' lives, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to stick to this, because there are also people out there like correction officers, bus drivers, you name it, frontline workers who these kids have to deal with every single day, who give them just the opposite, right? Where they stigmatize these kids because of the way they look, the way they, and I kind of want to just touch on this a little bit, because we have to be clear about when we talk about the targeting of these youth by whether it's the police, teachers, whatever it is, because of the way they look, their image, the way they talk, the way they hang out in crowds, right? How do you get to a level where you can say, no, I'm not like that person that you were dealing with, your probation officer, you know what I mean? I'm Brian Lewis. I'm here to help. How do you do that?
Actions speak louder than words. You know what I'm saying? So you can't just tell them that you're different, because you could try that.
Right.
You can't just even, dress like you're different, although that does help a lot, right?
Yeah.
So like you'll see if you walk into the Exalt space, you don't see us wearing like uniforms. We're not like, it's not that CO vibe,
Right.
We're not, they aren't expected to, walk in a straight single file line everywhere that they go.
Yeah.
Even the walls are, the space looks more like a WeWork space.
Okay.
It looks like a human services office,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of the things can go to like, symbolism and the external environment, right?
Right.
And so you got to pay a lot of attention to those kind of things. But what it really comes down to is that, you have to be able to demonstrate and prove, right? What I think it was like Aristotle or Socrates, we are what we repeatedly do.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You can't, our young people, it's like show and prove. What are you going to do for me? Are you going to, when I have a court appearance at 9 a.m. in downtown Brooklyn, and you live all the way in Queens or in Harlem or whatever, are you going to be on time for that court appearance? You going to show up? Because my social worker didn't show up, my teacher didn't show up.
Right.
You going to show up. And you show up 15 minutes early, and you're ready, and you're there for them, and you should do it twice. You do it 3 times. Now the young person understands you about this, right? It's not just a language to you.
Right.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where the work is proven. And then the other thing I'll say about that, which just to think about it, is being in this organization has given me a whole new appreciation for data, because I never really was, before I got to Exalt, somebody who was driven by data. I believe more of what Khalil Gibran Muhammad said about numbers lying. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, a number can tell you anything. A number can tell you that, you don't need to do something, or you do need to do something. I've seen people manipulate numbers so much. But when I got to Exalt, I really gained an appreciation for how data can be an important driver and can help inform behavior for staff and practitioners. So some of the data points that we collect and that we are proud of and that we boast, we actually will try to get a young person to not recidivate, right? And you talk about some of those other systems, they get credit and props the more that somebody recidivates.
There it is. Yeah.
So if you're a police officer or a correction officer or whatever, right? You work in a juvenile delinquent facility, when that young person's coming back again, the more that they're in your space, you're getting credit. But for us, it's like, no, how are we moving them away from that space?
Yep.
Are we getting a reduction in sentences? Again, a prosecutor, totally different approach. They want to increase the sentence. The more sentences that you get, and the more strict those sentences as a prosecutor, the more pat on the back you get. In Exalt, the more you reduce those sentences, the more pat on the back you get, the more you move up in your organization.
Yep.
So you can tell when you look at the top of the Exalt organization, who is the executive director, who is the deputy, who is the other directors of partnerships and courts. We're people who have risen up through those ranks, because we've demonstrated through our data, we've consistently reduced sentences, moved young people away from the criminal justice system. And we've done that over and over again, right? We've created a different kind of pipeline for not just data, but assessment and evaluation. Right?
Yeah.
So that becomes really critical.
Let's go into that data though a little bit more, right? What specifically, like, what are some of the reoccurring issues that you're seeing the most with the youth? Is there a reoccurring issue? Is there a pattern? Is there a trend?
Yeah, there are a few. So one of the things that people are really excited about is that arrests have been dropping precipitously in New York City over the last 7-8 years. Really, since I came into this organization, I came to Exalt in 2014.
Okay.
So I remember when I got to Exalt, there were probably twice as many people on Rikers Island as there are today. There were so many young people on Rikers Island when I started work at Exalt that there was actually a barge. And, you know, some people who are in New York City might not be surprised. They might have known somebody who was on, but it was literally a floating jail.
Wow.
They had young people on because they didn't have enough capacity for the amount of young people, because, you know, you have to keep young people separate from the adults, right?
Right.
In jail. But here we are in 2021. We've now gotten all the young people off of Rikers Island. There's no more young people. There's no teenagers on Rikers Island anymore, right? If you're 15, 16, 17, you are now diverted to a youth facility. So we've come a long way, right? And so people aren't impressed with that kind of data. They're like, oh, arrests have dropped, convictions have dropped in the city. Number of young people has gone down to 0 on Rikers Island. But I'll tell you what, there's other data that tells a different story and that tells other alarming trends.
What are these kids getting arrested for? Like, what are they getting arrested for the most? Is it like drug activity? Is it like robbery, violent crimes?
So that goes into the next point I'm about to make, is that we've actually seen a slight increase in certain types of crime, especially over the last year, 2 years, 3 years. So, and you know, people on the conservative end of the spectrum will highlight this and talk about why, you know, we've gone too far. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is true that, you know, there is a slight uptick in murders, right? There is a slight uptick in certain types of violent crime in the city. And so you have to pay attention to that, right? Because people will capitalize on that and they will try to say like, well, let's put them back in jail, right? We've gone too far. But the real truth is, and this part has been a consistent pattern to go to your question, the vast majority of people who are arrested in New York City, young people and adults, are arrested for property crime, right? Petty theft, trespassing, right? Things like that. Crimes where no one is being physically injured or hurt.
Right.
It's actually a very small number, even though it is increasing slightly, of murders in the city, especially compared to a city like Chicago, which I know very well. Right? Yeah. A very small number of violent felonies and sort of violent assaults comparative to other large cities of our size.
Right.
And even drug crime, right? Because, you know, and you know, depending on how old you are, if you remember back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when crack was king, in places like New York, right, drug crimes were like top, right? Yeah. But even drug crime has dropped precipitously. We're just not profiting drug crime the way that we used to. Right. So a lot of it right now is about property, and especially it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, if we look at this pandemic, and it usually takes about 2 years for the data to shake out. If you look out 2 years from now, there's even more property crime, more thefts, more, you know, because people are hurting financially right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of these kids, I'm thinking about myself too, right? I think the very first time that I had a police interaction was like they had the paddy wagon in high school, right? And I went to school in Queens, right? And the paddy wagon would constantly, you know, circle around the school, and we'd hang out at the bleachers. Back then I used to smoke, you know, so I used to smoke, I used to hang out with my boys, and I used to rap, right? So we're always like in between classes, we hang out in the bleachers, but then we get picked up by the paddy wagon, and you have to have your program card. And if your program card showed that you had a gap in your schedule, then they would let you hang out. But if it didn't show the gap in the schedule, they would take you in. And so that, you know, I think what happened is we used to call these two guys Pinky and the Brain, right? Because there was like one short, stubby cop and one long, tall guy, you know, and they would always like just harass us. So we would call them Pinky and the Brain and run off to class. Like, we get it, we're going to class kind of thing. So that was targeting when I was in school and I was in the inner community, I was in the inner city, you know, so I get it, you know what I mean? What I'm wondering though, is if you're talking about, you know, trespassing and property crime, these guys are bored. They're bored. They got nothing better to do. They're just hanging out. It used to be that we used to hang out on the corner, right? And then we just meet up at the corner and get chicken rolls or like, you know, quarter waters or whatever it was, right? These kids are bored. I like what you guys are doing at Exalt because you have an educational component there. You have the internship. To me, that like is a good segue into entrepreneurship. It's a good introduction into entrepreneurship, right? I think for a lot of these kids. And with the digital divide that you touched on earlier, I think being able to get into the STEM projects, right? And trying to maybe incorporate that into their daily, like you guys did with, you know, providing the laptops and putting the money in their accounts. What more can entrepreneurs do? Can like small business owners do in the community to support the youth so that they can, you know, have less interactions with the police? From your perspective, what more can they do, small business owners?
Listen, I love that question. And I was even want to back up a little bit more because I do believe that our young people are bored, you know, and I think there's a lot of evidence of that. I also know that, you know, we look at history, the system has continually and will continue to criminalize Black bodies, right? And they're criminalizing, to your story, right? So when I hear that, what I'm hearing is it kind of didn't matter what y'all were doing, right? Like y'all were rapping, y'all were having fun or whatever.
Yeah.
But the police already had a target on you, right? And
Right.
so when we think about our young people and where they are, and we think about these systems that have created laws, and policies that are unjust and unfair, we have to think about ways that all of us can come together to try to fight against those policies. And it may not be the activist, right? It doesn't have to be the person that's in the street with the Black Lives Matter flag. It's everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so I love your question, because the entrepreneur plays a crucial role in fighting against those systems that criminalize our young people and warehouse them in jails where they don't belong. And Exalt, again, has created a really great model for that, because what we're doing is we're inviting those entrepreneurs in to say, be a mentor. Be a mentor, like dedicate your time. You can do so much in 8 hours a week to turn a young person's life around completely, to the point where they might have been looking at 10, 15, 20 years in jail if they didn't get to connect with you for mentorship. But because you were able to just dedicate a few hours of your time to developing those soft skills in that young person we were talking about, to making sure they understand how to move around an office, to understand how to file some paper, whatever it is, right? Because we're able to do that, we can now go to a prosecutor and a judge and say, this young person does not belong in jail. They belong in society with the rest of us. They have something to contribute. And you are literally contributing to dismantling oppressive systems by doing that. So entrepreneurs have a very, very powerful role to play. Systems. We invite them in, right? And we want them to think creatively with us. Like, what other projects, what other things could you be doing? Because a lot of our young people do come to us and say, I want to be an entrepreneur.
What do they talk about? Okay, so like, and I hate to impose onto a kid, right? I think that's the last thing I wanted to hear somebody preach to me when I was a kid, like, get out of here, old head, right? Get out of here, old head. Go do something, old head. You know what I mean? And then, at the same time, it was the same old heads that were like giving me game at my level of understanding. You know what I mean? They weren't giving me too much game. They were giving me game that I could understand. When they saw me get into an argument or something, hey, come here, young blood, let me talk to you, right? Do this instead. And then I started to like understand and process. So it's about meeting them where they're at. I'm wondering for you, okay, you're talking to these kids on a daily basis. What are they into? What do they want to get into? Is it like, are they into tech? Are they into like, science and engineering? Are they more into like, because there's a lot of gang activity out there. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of it, this is just me talking, this is my opinion. I think a lot of the recidivism is due to the hip hop culture in the neighborhoods. You know what I mean? So when you see more kids gravitating towards, we all grew up like this in New York. You know what I mean? Think of Paid in Full. Think of Outpo. Think of, that's what you see in the hood. Like you see the drug dealers and you're like, okay, this is my way out. Today we have tech. So there's an option there.
It's interesting you say that. We do have a whole lesson plan on that. And we actually have the youth watch a music video by Lupe Fiasco.
Okay,
he breaks that down, right? He's kind of like, what happens when all you see representative of yourself is the video vixen or the thug. Right? And that's it. That's your world, right? And what does that do to your psyche and your consciousness? There's some truth to that. I think that, it's like I was saying before, that's not the primary driver of how a lot of these kids end up in. But they see that too. So we watched that video with them and we talked to them about that stuff. And they do recognize that, right? They're like, yeah, the hip hop industry does help to fuel a lot of these things. But we even take it to the level of, well, who runs the hip hop industry?
There we go.
Right? Wealthy white people, right? We don't own record labels, right? So if it is true that we're pushing misogynistic images of ourselves or thug image or whatever, right? Where are those images even really come from us, or are they being pushed by like people outside our community? So it's like even that to get it down to that level. But what the kids tell us, is that a lot of them just want to be in control. They want to be in control of their own lives, right? And that's why for me, it always comes back to this thing about social control, because everywhere where these kids live, they don't have control over their own lives, right? The teachers are telling them, gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta be here when the bell rings. Parents telling them like, you don't work hard enough, you can't be in my house, you gotta be out by the time you whatever. Like you said, right? Like old heads telling them one thing, right? So we try to avoid all of that kind of noise and static with them. Say, well, what do you want? Right? What do you want yourself? And a lot of times they're not 100% sure, but what they do know is that they want to be their own boss. The kids say that to me over and over again, like, I want to be my own boss. So we're like, okay, if that's what you want to do, how do you develop a business plan?
There you go.
Like, what does that look like? How do you employ workers? We have an activity at Exalt that the kids love, and it's called You're the Boss. And they get to role play being a boss and dealing with the real challenges that bosses face, like a reduction in force, layoffs, right?
Love
And it's
that.
funny because when they think of being a boss, they don't think about stuff like that.
Right.
They think like, oh, I'm in charge, I'm telling people what to do. But
Right.
now they're sitting here and they're looking like, okay, I got this much budget, I got to lay off these 5 people,
There we go.
and I got 10 people that are working for me.
Love it. Love
And
it.
they work it out, right? And it's amazing to watch them go through those challenges. Be like, I didn't realize being a boss required this level of thinking, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's important we give them those skills and kind of run them through those modules so they can practice this kind of stuff. Because like we were saying before, you're not going to get access to that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think they're a perfect age to embrace it, right? And to like make it their own, understand it. And then, you know, that's the reality. It's not about just calling shots and telling people what to do. I love that you guys do that, right? So let's talk a little bit about the racial side of it though, because you mentioned, you know, and for me, you know, I'm going to be real with you. A lot of the kids that I hung out with in high school, you know, it's New York City. We're diverse, right? So it's like you got the black kids, you got the Spanish kids, you got the Chinese kids, you got the Indian kids. It's a diverse crew. You know what I mean? But what happens is, I think we were targeted because there were a lot of us. You know, so like, how do kids today, the kids, especially the youth that you're working with, how do they feel about? I guess, do they think they're being targeted because of their race, because of where they live? Do they know why they're being targeted? Do they feel like they're being targeted? Like, do they talk to you about that?
Yeah, we talk about that quite a bit. You know, they definitely feel like they're being targeted because of their race.
Okay.
They understand that despite the fact that we say we have a society that's colorblind in terms of its justice system, and this is one of the first conversations we have with them, right? It's like they won, they walk into our space. You know, our society claims that we deal with everyone equally, right? We show them the image of Lady Justice with the blindfold and the scales.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know, critique this image, right? And the first thing that they say to us is, that ain't the way it is, right? Like,
Right.
Like they know I'm black, they know I'm
Right.
brown. You know, they you can't act like you actually got blindfold up there, right? You know,
Right. Right.
they do feel those things. You know, I do think in New York City is complex though, like you said, right? And especially coming from Chicago, where race is so black and white. You know, it's like in Chicago, it's like they're literally just like black people, white people, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans.
Yeah.
And you know, it's especially where I grew up, right? Like it's not, and everyone lives where they live.
Right.
You know, but in New York City, I mean, like there's Dominicans, Haitians, and you know, the complexity in the Dominican community of like how they have. So all that stuff is there too, right?
Yeah.
And what we had to create in our curriculum was a platform for them to work through all of those things and have all those things validated.
Sure.
We never want them to be told this is what race looks like or this is what racial injustice looks like, but to invite them in so we can hear from them. Because exactly what you said, like you asked a perfect question, right? What did they think about it?
Right.
Because that might be evolving. Because they might today think that, you know, it looks this way, but next week, 2 weeks, a year from now, I think it looks different. So we try to create an experience that honors that.
So like for me, right? And I you know, I think I'm a kid at heart a lot, you know? And sometimes I might process things immature. Like I might just go back to my immature 16-year-old self and I'll be like, this is how I feel about it until I get information. You know what I mean? And then I get information, I start processing information. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's this education piece, right? Which is like, you know, academically, but then there's also educo, knowing yourself and learning how to adapt within an environment, right? And then there's also like new information. There's re-educating yourself around that new information. So I think a lot of, and what you touched on in the beginning is key. I think a lot of us get away from it because we got so used to it and we became so desensitized to it, is the fact that everything is, a lot of the academic system and the curriculum is Eurocentric, right? And because we don't look at it from a capitalistic perspective here in America, we kind of look at it because of the way that we're targeted. We kind of look at it from a more of a socialist perspective, right? And a quote unquote Marxism perspective. I kind of want to get away from that because I think that's more programming, right? For me, what worked when I got into real estate and I started selling, you know, I started out in the hood. Right, Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, you know, Flatlands, Flatbush, right, you know, the hood, Bushwick, and I ran into a lot of pre-foreclosures, right, and those pre-foreclosures, you're talking about first-generation homeowners there, right, so you had a lot of older seniors living in those homes, in those communities, and gentrification started out, and now I found that because I felt a little out of place when I was in Manhattan. And when I was in Manhattan selling real estate or renting apartments, I was great at renting apartments. But when I tried to sell, I felt like I wasn't going to make deals because I was black. You know what I mean? And that was just me saying that, you know, I'm coming in without any information. I felt like, oh, well, every networking event I went to I'm like the only black guy there. I'm like a token black guy. right? And that was a thing back then. Ah, you're the token black guy. You know what I mean? And I absorbed so much information, right? And then when I started going to sales training, you know, all my sales trainers, when I was transitioning from being a rental agent to a sales agent, they were all older white men, okay? And they looked like the movie Wolf of Wall Street. Okay, I don't know if you've seen that one with Michael Douglas.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
And that's how they present themselves, right? So even if you look back then in those movies, you don't see, you know, the Boiler Room with Vin Diesel. You don't see that many. You don't see any black guys. You look at Wall Street. You don't see any black guys. You look at I think the only one that you might see a black guy was like Will Smith's when he did his Pursuit of Happiness, right? Wolf of Wall Street. You even look at Wolf of Wall Street. No black guys. You know what I mean? So you get this whole thing where like you don't belong, you know. And then I found Booker T. Washington. And when I found Booker T. Washington, I was like, oh, this dude was like, he was a capitalist. You know what I mean? And then when I looked at who Booker T. Washington was rolling with, he was rolling with all white guys. You know, and all those white guys funded the Tuskegee Institute.
That's right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then there was a parallel between him and Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie was an old Scottish man coming out of Scotland, working the steel mills and bootstrapped it all the way up till he could monopolize the steel industry. And he partnered with a black man, Booker T. So then race started to like get out of my mind little by little. It was more about skills, right? It became, and I said, okay, it's not about race, because all these older white guys that were sales trained, in my sales training, they were teaching me, they would pull me to the side and say, you get this, you understand this. You're doing well. Here, let me give you some more phone numbers. Call this one, call that one. And they'll go through my pitch with me, right? And, you know, for me, it's the race card stopped. And it became more about, what do I know? What am I willing to learn? You know what I mean? And then my race became like an emotion, kind of, right? And I couldn't put a color to how I felt anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, you know, that kind of parallels a lot of the journey that our young people will tell us too, right? Like, and it parallel, you know, because I'm a scholar of the world and history and all sorts of stuff. When you look at some of the people that you mentioned, that was also a lot of their trajectory. And, you know, some of the people that we also highlight in the Exalt curriculum, like Malcolm X. You know, Malcolm X was so adamantly proud of his race at one point. People called him a black supremacist and said he hates white people. But by the time he went on his Hajj to the Mecca, he said the human race is all one race, right? We're all connected. And so that level of transformation, like that level of evolution, is the most human thing. And that's what we all strive for and try to be. You know, definitely in Exalt, you know, we believe in that. That's one of the reasons why we don't say that we're like a pro-black program or a pro-brown program.
Right.
We're pro-freedom. We're trying to get our young people free. It just so happens because of the racism of the system that most of the youth that we serve are brown and black, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it is important that we tap into, you know, where people are now, but also encourage them to grow, evolve in terms of how they look at themselves in the world. And I think that a lot of that happens through exposure, you know, through, like you were saying, like being in different types of settings, new people, new environments. I mean, that's how Malcolm X was able to transform and change. That's how our young people change. And we want to honor that change and that growth.
From your opinion and your interaction with the youth, do you think that they're open to that level of exposure?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, these are New York City young people, right? And so you're from New York City, so you know, right? And so I believe that New York City young people are already sort of predispositioned to be that open to that because they're such global young people, right? Like, you know, they may come from households where like multiple languages are spoken already, right? Or like, you know, they're used to seeing all kind of people throughout the day anyway, right?
Yeah.
So especially for our young people, they're very open to that. You know?
Not the people, though. Not the people. I'm sure it's New York City. You're gonna run into everybody from, you know, it's a melting pot, right? But I'm more thinking about, are they open to working in corporate environments, right? Are they open
that
to...
part is kind of interesting, right? Because like on the one hand, many of them, like I said, they just want to be business owners. They want to be entrepreneurs. They don't ask to go into Google, right? They're not asking for corporate access.
Right.
But sometimes that's where we send them because we might recognize that the thing that they might get from going into a corporate environment is the thing that's going to help them to spin off and be able to open their own business, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't often ask for corporate access or corporate environments, right? But sometimes we do send them there because what we're doing is youth development as well, right? So like we're kind of like coaches, and you would know this from your coaching experience, right?
Sure.
Sometimes somebody will tell you something, and what they tell you isn't really what the issue is.
Right.
They'll tell you this is what I need, and what they need isn't actually what they think they need. But there's a different level of exposure or a kind of growth process you need to be put through to get to growth. And so, we make assessments and evaluations, and we'll say like, okay, well, this young person should go to a corporate environment, but no, this young person should go to a place that's more academic, or more like a place where they can do like childcare, or more a place where they can work on their tech skills. So yeah, it really depends. But our young people are almost always open to where we send them. And I will say, we do this day where we call it internship letter day. Yeah. Where almost like, a rite of passage, like, you've earned this internship. You've been through the training. You made it through the 6 weeks. You came consistently. You earned this opportunity to now walk into a Google, to now walk into a, Innocence Project, to walk into a ODA architecture. And we make it a big deal because it is a big deal, right? Yeah. And they're beaming. They're beaming. We talked about like what would it look like if we took images and video from that day if they earned that, because if the world could see that, these are young people that don't usually smile like that, right? They don't usually. These are the young people that are more hardened, right?
Right.
So now people are walking out like, bro, I'm working at Google, right? Like, it's great, right? So it's really cool to see that.
I think we need more conversations like that, Brian. Like I think we are, and this is not just the hood. Again, I'm trying to tell you, it's not just the hood. It's more like, for me, I think it's a class struggle. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, so it's like a lot of times the conversation should be, in my opinion, I'll talk to a kid and I'll say, listen, I would say something like that. I could see you, opening up the next Google. That's your competition. I got an 8-year-old son, and I tell him that all the time. And I say, listen, I tell him that all the time. I say, listen, you can create, we talk about Teslas, and he says, I'm not impressed with the Tesla because it doesn't hover. I said, what do you mean? He said, it doesn't hover. I'm going to beat Tesla because I'm going to make a car that hovers.
I love it.
And I say, wow, this kid, right? I'm over here hustling every day. I'm going to go and see if I actually want to get a Tesla. I'm not sure yet because now there's other players in the arena, right? So he's like, no, I want it to hover. So the way he's thinking, he's going to create the next Tesla. I think all the youth, 15 to 19, that they can be the next Elon. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
They can be the next. And I don't know if they want that though, if that might seem too far fetched, but I think having that conversation, opening their minds up to it, creates that gets the wheel spinning, planting the seed a little bit,
It does. I mean, and Elon Musk had to have been spoken to that way, right? Somebody, his parents or somebody told Elon Musk that he could be Elon Musk, right? And he began to believe that, because nothing happens in a vacuum. And so it's so critical that you talk to your child that way, and we talk to all of our children that way. That like, you that is your competition. Like, go for it, right? There's sky's the limit, and not only go for it, but here are the people that are adjacent to those people, right? So you can because that is also the way that the other half operates from a class standpoint, right? Like, the wealthy continue to perpetuate their wealth by providing and extending additional opportunities to their kin and to their loved ones and the people that they want to see succeed. Right. You have to do the same. You got to do that on our side. So I think that's a really critical element of that.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you guys are doing over there, man, at Exalt. I think we need more and more of that. From your perspective, aside from, the entrepreneurs helping out, what specifically can people do today? Like, as far as they watch this and then they understand this, they process this. What can they do today to contribute, to help out?
Yeah, I mean, financial donations are always appreciated because we're a nonprofit organization. Every dollar that you send to us is going to be reduced from your taxes. But more importantly than that, we don't have big grants from the government. We're independent. And so we need every dollar. And every dollar that is donated to Exalt goes to pay for a stipend for a young person. It goes to pay for our staff to do the incredible work that they're doing. So, go to www.exaltyouth.org and hit that donate button and give $1, give $10, give $15, give more if you can, right? The internship piece is a really critical piece. So I do hope people take me up on that and reach out to us. Again, you can connect on the website and just offer to, donate a few hours a week to help a court-involved youth to move their trajectory away. And then finally, anyone can make a referral to Exalt. So if you live in New York City and you have a young person who unfortunately gets arrested or has contact with the system, sign them up, get on that website, go to programs, and then enroll. And you can sign a young person up.
Yeah. Okay, I hope people actually take, that into consideration and take action steps towards doing that, right? I'm on this kick right now. I'm on the social capitalism kick. I was telling you earlier, I'm following Akon. I love what he's doing with Light Up Africa, right? And I think, the guy's, I think he's a billionaire in his own right?
He is,
Akon.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I
It's
mean?
really amazing, yeah.
So, yeah, what are your thoughts about social capitalism? Just to bridge that divide where you hear people talk one side socialism, one side capitalism. What are your thoughts on that, on social capitalism?
You know, I work really hard to try to like get beyond Eurocentric constructs in my own thinking. And a lot of that came from my own journey. I had an opportunity to go to Ghana when
Nice.
I was
A lot of history there.
oh, so much history. And I
Yeah.
was a junior in college, and I was really fortunate to be there during the 50th anniversary of their independence. And Ghana was one of the first African nations to be free from colonialism. And I did my whole dissertation when I was there on Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president of Ghana. And when I look at figures like Nkrumah, people like Patrice Lumumba, they said, look, like y'all gonna try to make us be in the European column. Y'all want us to be with the US. Y'all want us to be with Russia.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be with Russia or the US. We're gonna be with Africa. We African,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I love the independent spirit of that. And I've always tried to kind of carry the spirit of that and how they think. So yeah, what Akon is doing is amazing to me, right? Like how do we think about how Africa can be for Africans, how people of African diaspora can support the work that other people of the diaspora are doing, I definitely caught that bug when I was there. And my understanding is when you talk about like socialism, capitalism, and all this other stuff, well, in Africa, we've been in community for thousands of years. And we didn't necessarily have the term socialism as Karl Marx, designated it, but
Right.
we were social. We were social beings. It's part of who we are.
Yeah.
Africans have also been business people. They've been entrepreneurs, again, for thousands of years before Adam Smith came up with capitalism and wrote The Wealth of Nations.
Right.
And so we can't give Europeans credit for all these theories and ideas.
Right.
We've been doing these things, and we have a lot of that in our history as well.
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge it.
Yeah, you're well read, man. You're super well read.
Thank you. Yeah, I try,
Definitely.
it's important.
I need a book
recommendation.
recommendation from you. I mean, I'm building my own little library. I got more over there, but I'm gonna need some book recommendations from you in a minute.
Most definitely.
Yeah, man. We're gonna play a quick game. It's called Hands Down the Lightning Round. Okay. I'm gonna
Okay.
ask you 3 questions. You tell me your bottom line about these 3 questions. If you don't like the question, just go ahead and say pass. I'll move on to the next one. All right.
So wait, you looking for like a one-word answer? Quick
No,
answer,
you tell
right?
me whatever comes out.
Whatever
Doesn't have
comes-
to be
okay,
one
gotcha.
word, right?
Gotcha.
I'll just give you 3 topics, okay? All right. In the spirit of, and I asked this to somebody else, and I couldn't believe what he came up with. It was hilarious. I'm going to ask you, though. In the spirit of this racial tension and all that's going on right now, right? Do you think that being black is an experience or a skin color?
In light of what's going on right now,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
both. Can I say both?
yeah, please.
Yeah,
Whatever
it
comes
is
to
both.
mind.
It is both because it is. I mean, clearly, we see it, right? It's the skin that we're in, but it is more than just the skin that we're in and what we see. It goes deeper than that, and it goes to consciousness, right? It goes to like some of these people that I was talking about that I've read and I've tapped into their thought and their thinking and all this other stuff. And when you think about the assault that's happening right now, it's not just on the black body, and I think that's where you could get easily off track. It's also on the black mind. Right. It's also one, and we have to pay attention to all those things, and the black spirit, and the black soul. It's all those different things. So I think we got to pay attention to all of that.
Okay. So you think it's a matter of, it's both, it's an experience and it's a skin color thing.
And skin. Yeah. for sure.
Okay.
That's what I
Who's the blackest white guy you could think of?
think. The blackest white guy that I could think of?
Could be real person, could be
I'm
fictitious.
I'm passing on that.
Yeah?
I'm passing on that. I'm definitely passing on that. I know this is being recorded. I'm passing on that.
Tommy. Tommy from Power.
Okay. I can see that.
Tommy from Power. So I guess you're going to pass on the next one. The next one after that one is who's the whitest black guy you could think of?
Oh, I'm definitely passing on that. I'm passing on that. But we have conversations about that with the kids in Exalt. Like, and again, like we give white people too much credit for certain things, right?
Yeah.
Or Europeans too much credit because being articulate and well-read and all this stuff don't make you white, right?
Yeah.
And our kids know that. Our kids
Right.
are smart.
Yeah.
So like, but I don't even know where those ideas come from. I think people attribute those ideas to young black people, but they're not. So it's like, nah, of course not.
Right,
Like, our kids don't call each other white because they're smart, and these kids are brilliant.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got to tell you, because I'm thinking about it. Carlton, from the Fresh Prince is the whitest black guy I could think of, right? Because in my mind, it's like, at some
Makes sense.
point, yeah, at my mind, I think at some point, a black family living in Bel Air, hello, is it really a black thing here? You know what I mean? Like, let's talk about that.
You know what's fascinating about that though? Like, because I was watching the retrospective on, Fresh Prince that came on HBO. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And I love Fresh Prince when I was a kid, right? And I used to think that, right? I was like, oh man, Carlton's so corny, right? Like he's like. But then I was looking at it again, and I was like, actually, Carlton had like some real moments.
Right.
He had like real like black experience,
Yeah.
And sometimes it was different than Will's experience. A lot of times it was different than Will's experience. But I think one of the cool things about the show is that it shows Carlton was black, right? Sometimes it was so different that it wasn't what we recognized immediately.
Right.
But like that time they got pulled over by the cops, right? Carlton was like, no, like, and he was trying to explain to them, like, sir, I live in Bel Air, and my dad is a judge. It's like,
right.
It was like, kind of brilliant moments in the show where they kind of explored that.
Right. Yeah. So you can see he had a black experience.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That goes to the thing I said is both, right?
Yeah. Love it. Okay. And okay, last one. Do you think we should focus more on racial identity or financial security?
Definitely financial security, but I think the pathway to financial security is through racial identity. Especially for a lot of descendants of African slaves or people of the diaspora.
Yeah. This is a good one, right? We could talk about that for hours because Booker T. Washington went against, I think, Du Bois against that for a while, right?
He did. Yeah, that was a great debate, by the way. And again, Du Bois actually went to Ghana and ended up living in Ghana and opened up a library in Ghana. And I got a chance to study at that library when I was there, doing my research. So again, Du Bois's thinking evolved considerably on this over the course of his lifetime. But yeah, Booker T as well. But their debates were just awesome debates, right?
Yeah.
So, talk about, is it industry, is it capital that we should be doing? Is it politics? Is it moving the needle on the political realm?
Yeah.
I think they both had some really strong arguments to make.
Yeah.
For those debates,
It's an ongoing debate for sure. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. And finally, Brian, what is your bottom line? What is the reoccurring truth for you that no matter what, in spite of any setback, you think about this truth and it brings you out, it serves as rocket fuel for you? What is that for you? What's your bottom line?
Fight for the people that nobody else wants to fight for. The people that everybody else is counting out, leaving out. That is the thing. Until those people as the Bible says, the last are first. That is going to be my rocket fuel probably for the rest of my life. I'm a fighter for those people. I see myself in those people, and that's it. That's my bottom line.
Yeah. More power to you, man. I hear that.
Thank you for having me. This is a great conversation.
Same here, man. Listen, where do people find you? Can people find you on social media at all?
Yeah, they can. I mean, my personal social media, I'm on Twitter. They can go to BLewisLib, BLEWISLIB. That's probably the best way to connect with me. They can follow me all in my personal tweets. My wife is actually a politician. I retweet a lot of her stuff.
Cool.
That's probably the best way to connect.
Nice. Yeah, and HR Exalt also on Facebook, right?
Exalt Youth. If they go to www.exaltyouth.org, they'll see all our social media, our Facebook, our Instagram handle, and our Twitter. Do that.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Brian Lewis of Exalt. Had a great time getting to know you, what you're doing, the work that you're doing. Hats off to you and Exalt. All right. Big shout out to Giselle as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Bottom Line Podcast, where we say what we mean and we mean what we say, because at the core of everything that is, was, and forever will be, there will always be the bottom line.
Have a good one.